I spent 3 years looking after her, taking care of my husband's mother while also working part-time. My husband acted like a devoted son in public, but behind closed doors, he was hiding something. I couldn't keep up the pretense any longer. So, in a room full of people quietly crying, I played audio evidence to expose his true self. My name is Maya, and I've been married to Leo for 7 years. We live with my bedridden mother-in-law. 3 years ago, she became very ill and couldn't get out of bed. Leo suggested she move in with us because he was struggling at work. I agreed, feeling guilty for relying on us. I took care of her while working part-time. Though grateful, my mother-in-law often said, "Maya, that's enough. Please don't worry about me." But I always replied with determination, encouraging her. "What are you talking about? I owe you so much, mother-in-law. I know it's hard for you too, with work and housework and taking care of me. I don't want to burden you anymore." "My dear Maya," my mother-in-law said, concern in her voice. I reassured her, "It's not a burden at all. I want to be with you, and I'm doing this willingly, but I also want you to find your own happiness." She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears, and quietly whispered, "Being able to talk to you every day like this is my happiness, so don't worry about it." My mother-in-law always expressed her gratitude, even though she couldn't do much in her current condition. She had been kind to me since we got married, and taking care of her never felt like a burden. In fact, it felt like a meaningful mission. However, there was one part of my life that left me dissatisfied: my husband, Leo. He held traditional views, believing that housework was solely a woman's responsibility. When we first married, he wasn't as bad, but living with his parents seemed to make him more selfish. Leo didn't contribute much to household expenses, yet his entitlement was sky high. For instance, when he came home, he would yell if I didn't greet him at the door, saying, "Hey Maya, I'm home. Why aren't you greeting me? Hurry up, get my stuff." I frowned and voiced my complaints. "Listen, Leo, I've told you before. I'm not your servant. You should do what you can on your own." He retorted, "What are you saying? Who do you think is making money for this family?" I stood my ground. "Yes, it's true you're providing for us, but I'm also doing my part. We each have our responsibilities." "All you do is clean the house and chat with my mom," he accused. "I'm also working part-time despite that," I replied. He snapped, "Shut up. Your earnings are just peanuts and you can't survive without me." "Don't you dare defy me," Leo continued. "And you can't even contribute properly to the living expenses. The only reason we can live in this house is undoubtedly thanks to your mother." I used to fight back when Leo started these arguments, but he began threatening divorce every time we quarreled. "Watch yourself, Maya. Keep this up and we'll get a divorce, got it?" I whispered back, "Please, not so loud. Your mother is in the other room. Just lower your voice and don't always talk about divorce like that." "Yeah, right," he replied. "You would have nowhere to go if we got divorced. Besides, there's no company out there willing to hire a scrub like you full-time." "Maya, stop talking like that. Just shut up and listen to what I'm saying, you idiot. You're so slow." Honestly, I was more than ready to divorce my husband. But when I thought of my mother-in-law, I couldn't bring myself to go through with it. She would always comfort me, saying, "You can always talk to me if you're troubled, Maya. You're my precious daughter." My mother-in-law had been kind to me, treating me as if we were truly mother and daughter. Because of her, I wanted to take care of her properly until the end. I wanted to repay her for all the kindness she had shown me. I endured those painful days with my husband in this house because I couldn't entrust my mother-in-law's care to a man like him. Then one day, as I was preparing dinner, I heard the usual shouting from the entrance, "Hey Maya, I'm home. Come out and greet me." I replied, "I'm using the stove right now and can't leave it." My husband retorted, "What, are you kidding me? What kind of wife doesn't prioritize her husband?" He stormed into the living room, clearly impatient. He scolded me, "Hey, what are you thinking? I always tell you to greet me when I come home. Why don't you understand?" As you can see, I was just frying something. I tried to explain. "I don't care. You should have timed it to be finished when I come home." "You're useless," he replied. "Well, you never tell me when you'll be home," I said. "I told you not to talk back. A useless and insolent wife is nothing but garbage." My mother-in-law, who had come out upon hearing these harsh words, spoke in a stern voice. "Leo, that is no way to talk. Is it, Mom? "You're still alive," my husband said sarcastically. She defended me, saying, "Maya is working hard every day for this household, for both of you and me. That's what a wife is supposed to do, right? She earns a little, is a bit inexperienced in housekeeping, but she's far from being social trash." Finally, my usually quiet mother-in-law raised her voice, saying, "Enough is enough. You wouldn't say what you want about me." My husband's harsh words echoed through the room. My mother-in-law, who usually remained silent, took a stand this time. "Don't you dare slander Maya." My husband's eyes widened in surprise. "What, Mom? Are you on Maya's side too? You two are colluding, huh?" But my mother-in-law continued to speak, making a surprising request. "Leo, one request," my husband, somewhat bewildered, asked. "Huh, what is it?" She replied, "Just put me in a nursing home. I don't want to be a burden on Maya anymore." My husband was taken aback. "Huh, a nursing home? Where do you think we have that kind of money?" She insisted, "We still have your father's inheritance and my pension. I don't need a fancy place." Her unexpected suggestion left me speechless, and tears welled up in my eyes, touched by her kindness. Unfortunately, her words seemed to be lost on my husband. He reacted with deep disgust. "Don't joke around. There's no way we're putting you in a nursing home. That's a waste of money," he said. She pleaded, "Please don't say that. Life would be easier in this house if I wasn't here." My husband, concerned about his reputation, retorted, "If we put you in a facility, the neighbors and my colleagues will start gossiping that I'm an ungrateful son, won't they?" She tried to reassure him, saying, "You don't need to worry about that." My husband snapped at my mother-in-law, saying, "Then shut up and do as you're told, old woman. I'm taking care of you, isn't that enough?" At this point, I couldn't bear my husband's words any longer. I raised my voice, feeling the need to address the issue. "Are you talking about who's the ungrateful one here? This house originally belongs to your mother, doesn't it?" My husband, growing increasingly irritated, shot back, "Are you talking back to me again?" I continued undeterred. "But that's true, isn't it? 3 years ago, when you were fired, we were in trouble, and didn't your mother-in-law gladly take us in? How can you say that?" My mother-in-law, caught in the middle, tried to mediate. "Shut up, both of you." I couldn't contain my frustration and made a desperate plea to my husband. "And I'm not doing this reluctantly. I'm taking care of your mother out of my own will. Stop making unilateral decisions." However, my husband responded dismissively, "That's true. Troublesome." Then he left the room, leaving behind an awkward silence. In the midst of this tension, my mother-in-law couldn't help but apologize and cry. I tried to console her, saying, "It's not your fault, mother-in-law. The one at fault is Leo." Every day, I grappled with the reality I couldn't control. A few days later, as I was cleaning the house, a man who claimed to be an acquaintance of my mother-in-law paid a visit. My mother-in-law looked surprised but wore a full smile. "Oh, is it you, George? You came to visit. Well, if I was asked to visit my senior Linda, I couldn't refuse, could I?" The visitor acknowledged her warmly. "I remember trading with you a lot at work when we were younger, right?" My mother-in-law nodded. Yes, I'm grateful. "So what's your will? Why did you call me today?" My mother-in-law looked at me and apologetically asked, "Sorry, could you step out for a bit?" Assuming they had a lot to catch up on, I happily agreed, saying sure, and went out to buy some sweets. George, it turned out, was a former colleague of my mother-in-law, and their conversation seemed to bring her immense joy. I hadn't seen her this happy in a while. As I felt it was time to return, I found George preparing to leave. "Oh, excuse me, I'm about to make some tea," I offered. However, George declined graciously, saying, "No, that's fine. We finished our conversation. But thank you for always taking care of Linda. She's a benefactor to me, so it's reassuring to know that she has a daughter like you." With that, he bowed his head to me and departed. From that day forward, George became a regular visitor, and he and my mother-in-law always had lively conversations. Several months later, my mother-in-law's health took a turn for the worse, and she had to be rushed to the hospital. In a state of panic, I called my husband, but his response was disheartening. "My mom's in danger," I pleaded. "Please, I need you." My husband's response was callous. "As if I care. You're there. You can handle it." Desperation in my voice, I continued, "But the doctor says her condition is unpredictable. Please, I need you." However, my husband was obstinate. "No way. I'm leaving for a business trip today. I implored him to reconsider. What do we do now? Of all times, please try to cancel it. But my husband's response was cold and unyielding. Are you stupid? There's no way. My husband hung up abruptly, leaving me in a state of confusion. I slumped down in front of my mother-in-law's hospital room, overwhelmed by the situation. My thoughts raced. How could he go on a business trip while his mother was in this critical state? It felt incredibly cruel. How could I break this news to my ailing mother-in-law? Just as I was sinking into despair, George appeared, offering support. Maya, what's wrong? George asked. Something happened, right? Let's go to your mother-in-law's room for now. I nodded, appreciating his understanding. We entered the room together, and my mother-in-law looked at us, struggling to speak. George, you're here. So does that mean you did what I asked? She inquired. George replied, yeah, but are you sure about this? My mother-in-law nodded firmly. Of course. I have to clear things up before I go, don't I? She then reached out weakly, taking my hand. Maya, there's something I want you to know. I asked, what is it? She began to reveal a shocking truth. My son has been withdrawing money from my account meant for my pension and spending it on his mistress. He's been having an affair. He's a man who treated me like a maid. Tears welled in her eyes as she continued. I had some idea from the start, but to think he was even taking money from his mother's pension. My husband's actions left me speechless. My mother-in-law had asked George to investigate this matter. George, she said, please record what I'm about to say. It will be my last will. George nodded and took out a voice recorder. He carefully recorded her words, ensuring her wishes were documented for the future. The use of this recording is in your hands, Maya, my mother-in-law said, leaving it up to me. Feeling the weight of her words, I asked, yes. I'm the only one who can avenge my mother-in-law, squeezing her frail hand with determination. The following day, my mother-in-law passed away, entrusting her final wish for justice to me. 2 days later, at the funeral, a large crowd gathered to pay their respects. My husband, ever inappropriate, couldn't resist making comments. I didn't expect so many people to come, he remarked callously. It's a great opportunity to show off my skills as the chief mourner. I couldn't contain my anger. What are you talking about? You weren't even there when she passed. Ignoring my reproach, he continued casually, I'll make everyone cry with my touching eulogy. My bosses from work are here too. If they're moved by how filial I am, it could boost my reputation and lead to a promotion. Just kidding. My frustration was building. How can you act like this when your mother just passed away? But he remained indifferent. Just think about it. Now that mom's gone, I'll get dad's inheritance. I'm so lucky. I tried to control my seething anger as my husband cheerfully delivered the eulogy. He spoke about the 3 years of devotion and caring for his mother. Then with faint tears in his eyes, declared, but in vain, she has passed away. I have no regrets. I stood proudly, knowing that I had been able to support my mother until the end. During my husband's eulogy, sobs could be heard from the audience, and he seemed to revel in the emotional reaction he was evoking. He spoke with an air of drama, as though he had always been a dutiful son. The attendees, unaware of the truth, listened to his words with tears in their eyes. As my husband concluded his speech, I decided it was time to act. I stood up, facing him directly, and took out a voice recorder. His eyes widened with surprise, and he tried to stop me, but I paid no heed to his restraint. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room. Please take a moment to listen to this recording. I pressed the play button, and my mother-in-law's voice resonated through the room. It was a message she had recorded in a hospital, addressing the attendees. Thank you all for attending today. There is something I absolutely want you to hear. So I left this voice message. My husband and the attendees were taken aback by the unexpected turn of events. I believe you've just heard my son's speech, I continued. He was talking as if he had been a dutiful son. The room fell silent as the truth became evident. My mother-in-law, who knew my boastful husband all too well, had anticipated his behavior and taken steps to expose his lies. I increased the volume of the voice recorder so that everyone could hear every word. However, I continued, my son did not provide any care for me. In fact, he just kept shouting at me and my daughter-in-law, Maya. With the evidence of my husband's verbal abuse exposed, his face turned red, and he shouted for me to stop. Ignoring his outburst, I continued to play the recording. The attendees in the room were filled with anger, while my husband's face turned pale. My mother-in-law, speaking from beyond, revealed that he had been taking her pension without her permission and giving it to another woman. Her old friend had uncovered this shocking fact. The room was in an uproar, and my husband was in a panic, shouting for some form of assistance which was nowhere to be found. My mother-in-law delivered a final, impactful request from heaven. She implored everyone not to give her inheritance to her son, asking that it be donated or destroyed. She expressed her unforgiving stance toward him and sought the help of those present. As the recorded voice ceased, my husband's pleas fell on deaf ears. The attendees were giving him cold stares, and I looked down at him with a cold demeanor. "Can you comprehend the consequences of your actions?" I said icily. "You abandoned the care of your mother and were having an affair. You've learned a valuable lesson from all of this, haven't you?" My husband, in desperation, implored me not to say something that would further condemn him, but I made it clear that I would never forgive him. After tormenting his mother and belittling others, he would have to face the consequences on his own. Amid the cold stares from the attendees, my husband collapsed to the ground, his face drained of color. After this revelation, I decided to divorce my husband. With my mother-in-law's passing, there was no reason for me to remain in a marriage tainted by his actions. I later learned that my ex-husband had been fired from his job, which wasn't surprising since his boss had attended the funeral and likely learned of his misdeeds. In the aftermath, I demanded alimony from my ex-husband, which infuriated his mistress, leading her to promptly end their relationship. A few months later, my ex-husband found a new job through George's introduction, which, as I would discover, was all part of my mother-in-law's plan. He was employed at a company known to George, and from his salary, I received the alimony payments every month without fail. Meanwhile, I began living independently with the financial support left to me by my mother-in-law. George, who was genuinely concerned about my well-being, even helped me secure a full-time job. This, as it turned out, was in accordance with my mother-in-law's will. I can never express enough gratitude to my mother-in-law for all she had done for me. I stood before her grave, offering a prayer of thanks from the depths of my heart. "Thank you so much, mother-in-law," I whispered, making a solemn promise to myself that I would cherish and make the most of the life she had made possible for me.